Hey there, how is everyone doing? So this will be entry 5. So the concept I'd like to talk about today is the concept of I versus I. Now how the way that will be looked at is uppercase I versus lowercase I. So I spend a lot of time and I just meditate on things and think about stuff. And this is another little concept that I made. So what I like to look at about these two things is when you kind of look at the letter I mostly necessarily look at the concept of I am, which people say a lot, which that concept is heavily reliant on identity. So, based on the concept of identity, you have two types of I's. You have an uppercase I, which looks something like a column, two lines above, well, one line above, one line underneath, and then a line going through to connect both of them together. So it looks more like a pillar that's used to support things. So you can say that I is necessarily the uppercase I would be identity in your highest nature, or the most productive that you can be and the most healthy you can be in a sense. So lowercase I is basically a dot and a line underneath of it. What that kind of registers to me as is a sense of lesser identity. Now, what I mean by that is that us being human beings, we have a dualistic way of thinking. We have a dualistic way of being, meaning that we have an internal world and an external world. So one thing that we can necessarily look at is that the way we perceive the world is very, very weird, meaning that we have an outside world that we primarily focus on, and then we have an inside world of emotion, feelings, thoughts, and memory that, in a sense, is not does not line up with the outside world. But I think the mission in life is to actually try to get those things to line up. So by us being dualistic and having two different natures, because we have two different things that kind of make us up to a degree, or at least that's how the way we perceive it, those two eyes come into play. So I was always taught that the best way that you're supposed to necessarily make decisions and things of how to create, or act on those thoughts and bring those things into fruition, is the body works on a cycle of, it's mind, body, soul. But what that kind of translates you to and to how you use it is thought, emotion, action. So a lot of the times you will have a thought. If the thought is basically strong enough, that thought produces an emotion of inspiration or excitement or joy or some type of accomplishment. So then once you gained enough emotional energy, for lack of a better word, you then act on it, or you then try to bring that into the world. So it's a whole cycle that basically happens, or a whole triangle that basically goes on, with each side basically making up all of reality to a degree. Because if you go act and do something, then you then leave that thing in permanence. When it's left in permanence, it then becomes part of the actual world, because then another person will be able to observe it. So based on that whole concept, the uppercase I, or the concept of I am, is very, very, or identity is very important, because that is a force of thing within you that causes you to govern all of your lesser impulses that comes up. You see, us also being animals, or having an animal body, we have a whole host of feelings, fears, impulses, and reactions that basically come out over time. So a lot of the times they're there to necessarily protect us, and then they get recycled into a sense of our personality based on what we identify with. So higher identity and everything like that, if we look at the letter again, to what I was talking about, the uppercase I, it's a column, and then if you flip the column on its side and everything like that, it produces the letter H. Or it also looks like a bridge connecting two walls or two sides together. So basically, how the way that means to me is that once you understand yourself enough that you can flesh out a true identity, meaning an identity that you can congruently see within the world, period, and that gives you a sense of placement in the world, that also gives you a sense of purpose, and that can connect you to other things. So with the I still on its side, it produces the letter H. The letter H, a lot of good things start off with H, from what I've seen. Health, home, heart, happy. a few other things that slip in my mind right now. But this letter, when you flip it around, the things that it necessarily looks like, it produces a lot of symbols of conjoining two things into one. You know, the whole concept as above, so below, the letter I in its uppercase fleshes that whole concept out in perfect unity. So now lowercase I. So back to what I was talking about when I said, you know, mind, body, and soul. The lowercase I to me basically would be what happens when your identity gets destroyed and gets severed, and the reactions that happen. So if you look at how the way the lowercase I looks, it's a dot and then it's a line coming down from it. So if you look at a lot of Christian stories and a lot of biblical stories and everything like that, you know, they say certain things like Lucifer fell from heaven like a bolt of lightning. You know, lowercase I can be a thing that is a representation of that. The reason what makes me think that is because the lowercase I and the way it looks is, if you take I and make it a human body, it looks like the head is not connected. So if the head is not necessarily connected, then thoughts are not connected with body and action. So body and action, or emotion and actions, are just manifesting on their own accord based on whatever environmental factors come into play that influence the individual. So going back to identity and going back to the dot that's on the top and everything like that, thoughts are separated, thus unable to complete the entire cycle of creating something. So when thoughts become separated and everything like that, a lot of the times logic can go out the window and a person's emotion will just necessarily run their life. I think this is the root thing of what a lot of mental illnesses happen. So the lowercase I being consists of emotions, actions, or actions based on impulse and instinct, which if you look at both of those terms, impulse is a feeling that suddenly comes up. Instinct is basically the residual, I would like to say it as the residual consequence of doing an action over and over and over again based on environmental factors that then gets passed on from generation to generation. So by us having instincts and things like that, you know, we have the basic primal instincts of, you know, if something was to happen or if we was to feel threatened, you know, we go into fight, flight, freeze, fawn, response. But in this type of society now, we still have those, but we don't have the freedom of acting on those things in full totality. So it's like when those responses come up, we can't truly act on them in a good, healthy way. So it's like we kind of restrain or repress those things. So it's like the upper or the higher functionings of things is not working with the lower functionings to cause things to come into fruition. So lowercase I usually happens when an identity inside of a person dies because it cannot adhere to the world standards. So those things transfer to something else. So I believe that's where you get the freeze response and everything from. So the mind cannot tell the body to move, so the body just stays there whenever there is a threat of survival or some type of magnitude. So if you look at these things, back to what I was doing when I was flipping them upside down and seeing what they look like, lowercase I. So lowercase I basically is when the way it looks normally is, it looks like a severed head. So your higher self is connected to your lower self. So it's like your higher nature of who you are is not connected to your animal body. So because that happens, your animal body or your impulses and emotions, they have enough stuff or enough feeling or force to influence you based on whatever habitat or whatever situation you necessarily get in. And when that necessarily happens, you're not yourself. You're just the body reacting to whatever stimuli is out there in the world that is influencing. So how the way I basically see all those things happens is that when you destroy enough people's identity from when they're a child, all of the things that they gravitate towards, all the things they like, all the things that they will want to try to find a way to make money out of, you put them in a state of not knowing how to operate in the world, period. So when they don't know how to operate in the world, period, they can only function off of little I energy, meaning personally they can only function off the energy that of the things that are, the energy of the placements of their birth chart, animalistic abstract patterns, and all the things that they have done beforehand, and all of the things that they was taught to them, and all of the things that they have seen those ancestors and those people in their environment do. They draw information from that without trying to formulate their own thoughts about things. So when this necessarily happens, they're only governed by animalistic impulses, meaning fight, flight, freeze, fuck, dominance, and a bunch of other crazy shit. So when that happens, I know I keep saying that a lot, but I'm very, very sleepy and I wanted to make this. But you take the lowercase I and you flip it on its side. It'll basically be a dot and then a line coming out of it. That will look sort of like a ray. So I would like to look at that as, that is a sense of initiation, meaning that when your identity is severed, you're more prone to act instinctively off of something without truly necessarily considering the consequences, and just run with that. It's more like a tunnel vision thing. When it's flipped upside down, it's more so it looks like something that is trapped beneath something, and also it is an exclamation mark. So what I like to look at it as, the dot being an energetic impulse that rises within things. That's why whenever you have exclamation marks on top of, when you have exclamation marks after sentences and everything like that, I believe that's why they give it that sense of excitement and all of those things, because it's the energy rising from beneath. So if you look at another video I made when it talks about Pluto and everything like that, that's what an impulse would necessarily be. When it's also turned onto its other side, where the dot is basically on the outside and the line is going towards it, and the funny thing is, it looks like a penis trying to go into a vagina. I mean, I'm a male, and a male used to be a boy, or a man used to be a boy, so I also have a dirty mind. But one thing that I like to think about is that, one of those animalistic impulses would be just the sole need of procreation. So it's like when that identity gets severed and you go into that little I energy, all of the things that you're necessarily focused on, or as a male, your primary goal would be necessarily to procreate. So your life's mission or your virtue cannot be fulfilled in full entirety. So you'll have to pass that on to necessarily your seed to do that, or at least energetically. Meaning we all have free will, so we can actually choose to see if that's what we would want to make our life. But what I see with society and everything like that is that society now is based off of lesser, lower I energy, meaning that all of their thoughts, ambitions, and things to do has all toward what their environment is, meaning that is everybody trying to necessarily succeed, or they're working, or they're doing all of these things, but it's nothing wrong with that, and it's actually encouraged. But one thing that I notice is that people do not have the ability to relate, talk to, and actually talk about things that is more than just instinctual survival bullshit. Meaning that a lot of people that I come across, and some people that I interact with and everything like that, or at least from the environment that I've come from, and mostly these people are all online and everything. So a lot of these things, people that you interact with, they're all solely just in a lesser state of identity, meaning that from a previous video, they're not feeling their full self. So all of their energy and all the things that they get off of is basically off of the extremity and the animalistic impulse and the dopamine that comes with the concepts of survival. The reason why that is bad is because as a human beings, we have way greater capabilities than most animals, and being focused solely on survival necessarily, we produce a world where that energy comes into fruition fully. So it's like I'm thinking only to survive, only to do this, only to survive. So I'm only accepting and I'm only getting the breadcrumbs of something, because I will never believe that there is something more, and I won't even conceive that I can be of something of greater magnitude, because at the end of the day, I'm just looking at what's around me and I'm reacting off my environment and trying to survive. But the human brain cannot decipher what's real and what's not. So survival with us as human beings just become a matter of comfort, meaning that I'm just trying to just get all of my baser needs met rather than actually the severity of survival, which we do feel, and that's not to shame anybody that's in those predicaments. But once we get into that, we get a magnitude of such animalistic, impulsive energy of anger and this drive, and more so we're willing to cut and destroy anybody that we perceive coming in front of our way. And it's more so that's one of the biggest root causes of the world, is because we literally destroy everything before a threat is even made. So it's like we're recreating a world where, you know, everything was plentiful and we just had to understand things in order to get stuff. But now we're recreating a world to where it's that our only means is that everything is scarce and we only have to focus on survival, meaning we have to take from one another until there's nothing else to take. Which from how the way I see it, it really makes no sense, because we're not animals. Yes, I cannot give you a better thing of doing, but I can tell you one thing: nobody is truly sitting there trying to think of a better way of actually living first and foremost. It's just operating in a monetary gain and chasing what everyone else necessarily is chasing for the likes, the status, and financial gain that comes with that. Which one is nothing wrong with that, but if everybody does that, we still have no idea why we're here. You know, it's not survival, because we die regardless. So it can't be just we have to accumulate enough things to be here permanently. That's not the case. I refuse to believe that that's the case, because at the end of the day, those people that have done that, they still die. That's not what logic is. So I think there is something much more reasons that we have to be here within the concept or realm of experience, but we have to find out what we are, or who we are, each as an individual as well, to be able to figure those things out long term within our life. But I hope any of this made sense. I am extremely sleepy. I've been stuttering over my words. I'm still going to post this anyway. But if it's not coherent or anything like that, I'm just remake it. But have a great night.